The land of the rising sun, or Japan, has a million-long history in it. In ancient times, Japan was known as a closed and underdeveloped country in the world. But less than 1 century, this country was able to rise to become a great country, with an ambition to rule the world. Hierarchically, Japan, which at that time embraced feudalism led by the emperor as a descendant of the sun god. Meanwhile, the position of the shogun was under the control of the emperor as commander of the armed forces. However, since the 12th century, particularly after the Genpei War, the supreme leader of Japan was in the hands of the shogun, while emperor is only a symbolic ceremonial who had no say in governing. At that time, many Japanese sailors spread across the world as far as Asia to conduct trade. However, in the 1630s, when Europeans made expeditions to Japan, and they spread Christianity and Western philosophy, the Tokugawa shogunate worried about the birth of reform in the middle of society. Therefore, in 1633, the Tokugawa shogunate issued a policy by prohibiting its people from leaving the islands and prohibiting the arrival of foreigners into Japanese territory. About 7 years later, or in 1639, Yamatsu Tokugawa made a policy of sakoku, or political national isolation, with the aim to prevent Japan from outside influences and Western traditions. From then on, Japan became an isolated country from the outside world, and this policy lasted for hundreds of years. During the isolation policy in Japan, all shogunate regulations must be obeyed. If the shogunate found out that there were people who went out, then they would be executed. With the implementation of political isolation, this made a positive impact, where the Japanese people became very nationalistic. However, ironically, Japanese society itself became underdeveloped in every way. As society became more and more backward, Japan only dependent on the agricultural sector, and gradually, this began to kill the Japanese economy. Along with political isolation, in the 18th century, the economy of Japan went into a slump. Even the corruption in the shogunate was rampant. As a result, various rebellions and civil wars ensued. On the other hand, since the 1850s, Western countries asked for the Japanese shogunate to open themselves and normalize trade relations with Western countries, especially with the United States. In 1853, American naval officer Commodore Matthew Calbraith Perry, along with 4 warships, anchored in Japan with the intention to make a deal in order to establish cooperation with America. A year later, or on March 31, 1854, Japan and America made an agreement in the Kanagawa Convention. Japan was willing to open the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate to America as a trading area. For the Tokugawa shogunate, this policy was an option to retain power, along with foreign assistance. However, for the shogunate's opposition, led by Daimyo Chosu and Daimyo Satsuma, the Kanagawa Convention was seen as an embarrassment to Japan, because the Tokugawa shogunate humiliated Japan in front of the Americans. In order to gain more support, these two groups created rumors of harm to the Japanese people. As a result, the Tokugawa shogunate got a rebellion, and even the group of Daimyo Chosu and Daimyo Satsuma killed a British diplomat and a translator for the Americans. In 1867, the nobles who were in the circle of the imperial forced the shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu to return the mandate of government into the hands of Mutsuhito, or known as Emperor Meiji. 1 year later, In 1868, Emperor Meiji abolished Sakoku politics nationwide, and this event became known as the Meiji Restoration. After successfully modernizing Japan, the empire began to have desire to match Western countries, both in terms of economy, technology, and territory. All these causes start from an ancient Japanese teaching that was made doctrine by the empire. After the Meiji Restoration, the Japanese imperial was not satisfied, although Japan became advanced and modernized, especially in the Asian region. The empire wanted Japan to become a superpower like Western countries, especially about colonies. But Japan has one obstacle that is quite complicated, because to support industrialization, Japan is lacking in natural resources. Therefore, the Empire Japan gave a strong ideological doctrine to the military for the success of the war. One thing for sure, the imperial used an ancient ideological doctrine called RKvc, which means a region that is dominated by Japan. Since a long time ago, the imperial doctrine was indeed very attached to its people. Whatever the emperor orders, the people will volunteer to help, even with their lives. Day after day, the cultivation of RKvc doctrine is constantly inculcated into the Japanese military. Even the Japanese youth flock to the military in order to achieve imperial glory. Now, the empire began its ambition to seize the natural resources of other countries, such as Korea, Manchuria, and Taiwan. However, to fulfill these ideals, Japan had to face with two major countries at once, which are Imperial Russia and China. As early 1894, there was a civil war in Korea between the conservative group and the progressive group. At that time, the conservatives group asked help to China, while the progressive group asked help to Japan. According to the progressive group's view, if Korea wanted to become an independent state, they had to drive China out. As a result, both China and Japan sent their troops to Korea. Short story, the battle from 1894 to 1895, won by the Japanese over the Qing dynasty. Although Japan could not take Korea fully, at least Japan had great influence in Korea until finally in 1910, Japan succeeded in occupied Korea. On the other hand, to capture Manchuria and Taiwan, Japan had to deal with the Russian Empire. Without a second thought, in February 1904, Japan carried out a massive attack against Russian ships in Port Arthur. As a result, the battle between Russia and Japan was fierce for 19 months until September 1905, with Japan as a winner. Japan's victory in the war against China and Russia certainly brought self-confidence for Japan itself. This became a dream for the Japanese Empire, namely Fukoku Kyohei, or rich country, strong military. On the other hand, European countries including Britain, saw Japan as a reliable ally. This is exactly what later made Japan into the World War I. July 1914, the World War I broke out. As a country known for its strength, Britain recruited Japan as an ally in the Entente faction. In the ongoing First World War, Japan made a great contribution, because, on the 5th of September to the 6th of November, 1914, the military of Japan successfully disarmed German troops in the Mariana Islands, Caroline Islands, and the Marshall Islands in the Pacific. However, due to the injustice in the division of colonial territories, Japan later aspired to seek revenge against Western countries in World War II, alongside its former enemy, Germany.